Hi there, let's talk about the great new features in version 1.4 of Volumator. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the new geo-change threshold. So I'm going to use this setup here to demonstrate how it works and what it's useful for. But the gist is that it allows the depot system to determine when changes have occurred to the geometry of the map that otherwise might not be picked up. So in this example case here, we've got one small room here. It's fairly simple. We've got a depot in it. And on the other side of this wall here, we have another room with a depot in it. There's a barrier over here. So this is a fairly simple couple of rooms. Let's just quickly build them both. I'm just going to switch the lighting off. And we will start both depots. So there's the first one. The second one's running over there. And if we select both our volumes and show selected, we can see our two volumes separated by the wall here. Lovely. The use case for this is, let's say somebody has moved this wall here. And now we can see that the volume attached to this depot, it only comes to here, the old wall location. And so when this depot runs, the tester will fire out and it will test, okay, is there anywhere that I can get to or anywhere that I can detect that isn't covered by this volume? Now, it will immediately come out and see this space here and say, there's loads of problems, and it's going to immediately fail the tests and rebuild the volume. So let's just quickly do that. So immediately failed, it's rebuilding the volume. And now if we make sure that we have that volume selected, if I show it here, can you see it now comes to here, which is the new wall location. Now, obviously you can see another volume here, and that is the volume from next door, and that is still going to the old wall location. So this is a problem. So you think, oh, okay, I'll fire this depot out. The problem is the tester will come out from here, but it won't detect any problems. And that's because it can only get to the spaces that it can get to, and it hasn't detected any problems. This is next door, and it's the geometry that's changed, and it's made this room smaller, and therefore the tester can't detect a problem. Now, if you've been using Volumator for a little while, you'll know about in the test panel here, we can test for this kind of a scenario with the Test Selected Volume for Geometry Changes button. Now, what that does is it takes the previously detected geometry points, and it checks to see if those points are still colliding with geometry. So it basically checks, has any geometry changed? And if so, it'll mark it as a question mark and you'll be able to see it and get the info on it. So when I run that, I can see, okay, these are all previously detected points that were on geometry that are no longer colliding with anything. In this case, we can see that there's 17 of these warnings, 17 points that were previously detected. And so what our new geo-change threshold does is that before the depot tester is fired out, it will immediately run one of those geo-change tests. And if the number of errors that comes back from that is greater than this value, then it will fail the test before it's even run a tester. So if we increase this to a non-zero value, basically 0 is off. But if we increase this to, say, 10, then anything more than 10 geo-change warnings will cause it to fail tests. So in this case, we know that there'll be 17. So we could just run this depot and it will immediately check and be like, oh, there's too many geo-changes, I'm just going to rebuild the volume. So you can see it's immediately failed. It says here it's due to 17 geo-changes. It's rebuilt the volume. And now the volume should come to the right location. Yay, there it does. So now if we look at both of our volumes again, both correctly coming to the right points, separated by the wall, everything is wonderful. So it's a great way for you to catch cases where geometry has changed, making the room smaller, which previously the previous system wouldn't have detected. Now, why isn't it set to a non-zero value just to begin with? Now, the reason for that is because the system isn't smart enough to know what is an important geometry change and what isn't. And so any point within the space could show up as a geometry change if it's changed. So as an example, if I move this pillar here, and then let's go back to our volume, and then I run the geo-change test, which is the same thing that will happen when the depots run. You can see that it detected some points on the pillar. Now that the pillar's been moved, they're no longer detecting, and it's like, oh, I've got 6 geo-change warnings. And of course, those aren't actually significant to the space because it's in the center of the volume. So it's hard for the system to know what is a significant point and what isn't. But what you can know is that if there's a lot of them, then obviously it's important and you should probably rebuild the volume. And that's why it's worth, setting this to a non-zero value, but not saying it's so low that every tiny little change in the map is going to cause a rebuild, potentially unnecessarily. So that's worth just keeping in mind. But it is a great system for catching these sort of cases where otherwise the previous system wouldn't necessarily caught it. And it might prove helpful in cases where you've got a lot of rooms next to each other and walls are getting shifted and whatnot. A user requested feature was the ability to add horizontal barriers. So until version 1.4, all barriers are being vertical. And what that means is that barriers are effectively like walls. They are fake geometry that is used to block detection in drones. So in this example here, we've got an archway. Let me just come in here, build a barrier volume. And you can see that if we enable opacity, you can see here's our sort of wall shape here that is blocking the space. Great. Now, if we come over to this example here, though, we can see that we've got sort of a trapdoor down here that has a separate area in it. And let's say we wanted to block this off because maybe the drones were accidentally flying down there or whatever else. So we want to build a horizontal barrier that pads out the space here and stops any drones or detection. So if we come over to the barrier panel here, instead of being in vertical mode, we just switch to horizontal mode. And now we fly down to where we want to be. And we just build either barrier, plane, or volume as usual. And you can see that the shape here, I've got the opacity on again, so you can see it nice and easy, but we can disable that. And you can see the space here, and if you want to, you can increase it. And so this will allow us to block off these areas so drones and detection won't be able to go down there, and it will allow us to not have to worry about that space. Now, in this case, I had the drone height variability maxed out. And so if that wasn't there, there was the potential that the drone could have gone downstairs, which obviously we didn't want. So in this example here, let's say we want to build a little volume here. We have a barrier already placed here, blocking off this section. And we're just going to build a quick volume here. And we can see it's covering the space nicely. But let's say that we want to lower the height down. Of course, we can use the edit buttons, but another thing that we can do now is to build a horizontal barrier. So let me just switch the lighting off, see this a little bit better. So we'll just come to the height that we want to build the horizontal barrier. We're going to build a horizontal plane like this. We can see it here. And then we can just lower it down to where we want. And that will be the new height of the volume when we build the next one. And the reason for that is because the height is detected constantly, and these barriers will obviously count as part of that. And so when we build our new volume, we can see that the volume now goes to the height of the plane. So it's also a great way of restricting the height of volumes and to be able to specify it uniformly. So if you're using depots, for example, you can make sure that any rebuilds or anything like that are always using the same height. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, with the horizontal barriers is that it's just a simplified bounds-based system. So effectively, it's like line of sight from the point you click the button, and then it just builds out the maximum bounds. So if I just draw up one here quickly, we can see it's square. It doesn't go into this section here. It just goes to the maximum extents of the points that are reached. So it's always going to be a square. It's going to be aligned to this sort of best angle that it can find. So it's a pretty simplified shape, but for the purposes of a barrier, it's perfectly good. It's also incredibly quick to build. There's also been a ton of work done to improve barrier detection in the first place. And so now building things in less than perfect environments is going to result in much better barriers. So in this case here, we have curved edges, which aren't really pointing to each other. So there's no parallel walls. There's no ceiling above. And yet the barrier created will still be pretty darn good here. So this vertical wall here is pretty good still. And so I'm constantly making iterative improvements to barrier detection. So it's still fast and pretty darn accurate for something that effectively is just done there just to block detection in drones. There's also been a ton of quality of life improvements throughout the system. An example being, say, when depots fail tests, they'll now tell you in the status bar. So let's have a quick rebuild on this depot here that's got a volume with some problems in it. So when the tests fail, it says, hey, I'm rebuilding it due to having 6 warnings. Another example would be volumes no longer get stuck on geometry above and below. Previously, they might have got stuck if you had the volume height variability set really high. That's the setting here. So now effectively, this can be cranked as high as you like, and volumes can effectively go wherever they want in the Z-axis and the height, and they won't get stuck. And thanks to the new horizontal planes, you can now limit things based on your needs. It'll be really, really easy and successful. There's also less chance of bleed into other rooms caused by corner detection, wiggling, a whole bunch of stuff under the hood. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that things are running much better than ever. It's going to be great. So as always, there's been a whole bunch of under the hood improvements as well. So the combine and separate system is working better than ever. Things are smoother and running faster and more optimized with every update. So hopefully your volume building experience is better than ever. Thanks very much.